I want you to picture something. You're out for 2 weeks, maybe vacation, maybe you got the flu. I don't know. You don't have access to your phone, email, nobody can get a hold of you. Now, answer this question honestly, okay? What actually happens to safety performance at your sites while you are out? Seriously, what do you think happens? Does safety performance hold true? Does it start to drift? Or does the whole thing stop moving until you get back? Because that answer, not your TRIR, not your audit scores or your training completion percentage, that answer tells you what kind of safety leader you might actually be. And here's the part that's going to sting a little. All right. Most of us have never really asked the question because we're too busy being needed. That's what we're going to fix today. This episode is going to be a little different. I'm going to give you a set of labels, modes really are what they are, that describe how safety professionals actually operate. And some of them you're going to recognize in your peers right away. One or two of them you're going to recognize in the mirror. I know I did. That's the point.
Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind everybody to go out and support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast happen. Of course, I'm talking about Mighty Align Floor Tape, the original partners in safety on the Safety Pro podcast. Now, look, if you're struggling in your facilities with layout, floor marking, maybe you're having safety issues related to organization, concerns, Mighty Align's got you covered. You're going to be able to 5S your entire facility without painting a single part of your floor. They've got line tape, they've got directional signs, they've got icons that you can get to stick on your floor, instructions, you can get custom logos and design signs, labels, you name it, they've got you covered. They've got floor tape that is slip resistant. They've got floor tape that is built to withstand forklift traffic. Don't take my word for it. Go get a sample for yourself. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Fill out the form. They'll send you a free sample. It also lets them know that we sent you. Again, mightylinetape.com/podcast. Also, big shout out to Aero Safety. I've gotten to know Drew over the years at Aero Safety. I've had Drew on the podcast a number of times where he's broken down some safety issues that all safety managers face, and we have great discussions. Hope to have him back on again soon. The reason why I talked to Drew is Aero Safety, as far as safety services providers go, they are the official safety service provider of the Safety Pro podcast. I'm going to tell everybody that asks, hey, do you have anybody that can do custom training for us? Do you have anyone that can help us with our safety program development, audits, inspections? Drew has you covered. I always send people to Aero Safety. Go to aerosafetyus.com. You're going to get something that's built, designed for you in your business, not some generic off-the-shelf service. All right. That's aerosafetyus.com. Get a custom quote today.
All right. So a listener question got me thinking about this. The difference between a safety manager who's a taskminder and a safety manager who's a micromanager, and a safety leader who's actually strategic. And the more I sat with this question and thought about it, the more I realized that this isn't just a three-way split. It's a whole taxonomy of different types of leaders. And man, you can go to LinkedIn and you can get all this information. I'm not breaking any new ground here with some research. I should wear a lab coat or something, but no, nothing like that. This is just some observations that I've made, talked to some colleagues, and I've come up with a few labels, general labels, that I'm simply going to use to describe types of approaches that we sometimes can take and what we can do about them. That's all this is. And this is just one safety manager, safety professional to another. All right. So, look, there are a lot of ways to do this job, and only some of them can scale. And so I used to just talk in terms of being tactical and strategic and being able to switch quickly between those two modes when things needed to get done. So I'm going to expand on that here for you. All right. So again, here's the plan. First, the 3 big postures that we can take, then 7 specific archetypes you will absolutely recognize from the hallways to the conference rooms and virtual meetings that you have. You're going to go, I know that person. Again, don't take these labels I'm using as anything official. These are just labels that I'm going to use generically. There's probably better labels to use to describe them that you've read in some of these guru books and leadership management books and things like that. That's fine. I just want to apply labels so that we can then describe the actual behaviors and then move on. That's what I want to do for you today. All right. And finally, the practical piece, which is what I always try to do, is how you actually move from one mode to another and do it effectively, right? So let's start with a distinction because it's simpler than people make it. Taskminder manages the work. Micromanagers manage the worker. See? The listener who sent me this question was describing a manager they had and wanted to know how I can better manage interactions with a micromanager, and then gave me some examples. And again, it was very limited. It was a text exchange. It was very limited, and my response was simply, now, wait a minute. It seems like they just are looking for updates on the work. On, hey, I'm going into a meeting. One of them specifically said, I'm going into a meeting. Do you have an update on? And it was some project that they were working on. And they were like, we just talked about this the day before. And so I'm like, well, see, I think what they're doing is just managing the work. That sounds more like a taskminder than managing you, which is a micromanager. So there's that. And then there's the strategic leader who manages conditions, right? The conditions. And we'll talk about those. That's it. That's the big 3 that I want to talk about. And then there's sort of these degrees in between that we'll get into. Everything else is just a little detail, right? But the details, those little degrees in between those 3 big archetypes, that's where the money is, right? That's where we want to go and look and see what kind of labels we can apply to these different ranges in between. All right. Taskminder. Let's get into the administrator, right? The administrator optimizes for completion. So that's something you want to look for. And instead of saying, hey, I've got a micromanager, you need to ask yourself, are they managing the work or are they managing the worker? Inspections that are done, training matrix is all green, audit findings closed by the due date, safety data sheet binder is current and up to date or has been reviewed. Committee meets on the second Tuesday because, it always has met on the second Tuesday. Look, I want to be careful here because this is not a bad person. This is very often a conscientious person. The administrator is reliable. They finish things. In an organization with weak systems, the administrator is an upgrade over chaos, lack of, processes and systems. They are focused on making sure the work is getting done, right? Big difference. They'll usually ask for updates. Maybe they can get annoying with the repetition, and you can have a conversation about that. You can do that by saying, I will have an update for you on X by the end of this day. And say, hey, set a reminder to reach back out to me if you haven't heard from me. Set something up to manage that. But they're after, I just want an update. Maybe they're getting asked. Something to think about. They're responding to the environment they're in as well. All right. So There's definitely a ceiling, and the ceiling is this: compliance is their finish line instead of their starting line. That's it. The diagnostic you want to use here is ask an administrator what changed in the risk profile this year, and you will get a list of activities. We did 240 inspections. We rolled out the new Lotto training. We updated 12 policies. Great. But what changed? What's less likely to hurt somebody today than was maybe in January? If you get like crickets or a metric that moved for reasons nobody can explain, the administrator's real failure mode isn't laziness. It's that they mistake the artifact for the outcome. The completed form becomes the deliverable instead of the evidence that thinking happened. Something took place. Instead of them being able to explain the result of the work that was done, what did we achieve, improve, or significantly reduce, they're only able to tell you how many of the things were completed. That's the administrator. One thing that is another sign for this is when somebody gets on a call and they celebrate X number of days without a recordable. But you could go into the site and see this isn't finished, this isn't done, this, and not just in that moment in time, but you could tell that this is an ongoing pattern of things being not in compliance, or that there's some risk. Folks were just getting lucky, but this person will be able to tell you or report to you that work gets finished. All right. So now let's move to the micromanager, the controller. Okay, a little different than the administrator. The controller optimizes for, it's in the label, control. This one gets talked about as a personality flaw, and sometimes it is, but more often I've found it's a trust failure. Now, hear me out on this one. The controller doesn't trust the system or doesn't trust the people running it. So they insert themselves everywhere. They redo delegated work. They correct the correction. They want to be copied on everything, and they want to review it before it goes out. Now, here's where I want to push back on the standard take of the micromanager a little bit. And I'm going to share a little tip that I learned a long time ago, and I still think it applies today. Everybody says the cost of micromanagement is morale, like you're just killing morale. I think that's where it can show up. Morale is like a symptom, I believe. And this is not a hot take, or like I said, I'm not breaking any ground. I'm just telling you, I've thought about it and talked with some colleagues about this. Hear me out on this. Morale is a symptom. Okay, I don't think that's the cost that should scare you. Does that make sense? The real cost is data. People stop reporting to a controller, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Think about how you would interact with a micromanager. You're going to protect yourself because we think that they're looking for mistakes, and I don't want to show mistakes, so I'm going to inadvertently omit some things, hide some things, or just avoid some things. Okay? And if every near miss report turns into an interrogation or gets nitpicked, and every honest, here's what actually happened, turns into a correction, people will learn. They learn to file a clean version. They learn to solve it locally and just not mention it, and sort of like keep that data under the radar. It never pops on a trend going forward. And then you're standing there looking at your leading indicators going, hey, our reporting is down. Our culture must be improving because of our incidents are down. And so our culture might be improving. No, you broke your instruments, and now you're just flying on those instruments blind. So we call it directionless flight. That's a term I've used before. So I think the diagnostic for this one is uncomfortable. I mean, you have to ask yourself, do my site reps or site managers ask my permission for things they already are accountable for? If a person who owns a decision keeps checking with you before making it, Maybe you've trained them to do that. Maybe you've taught them to come to you. All right. Maybe it is them. But again, before we start diagnosing others, we should always start with ourselves. Whoa, this one hit me like a brick wall a while back. It was uncomfortable, but I'm glad it happened. Is maybe I'm the problem. So we always want to start with ourselves and ask ourselves that question. And as far as micromanagers go, I think that there are times, there's a case to be made for micromanaging. That is managing the person, okay? Not the work, but the person. It was Jack Welch, famed CEO of GE, many years ago, had a really good formula for this. And he said micromanaging might be needed in one of three circumstances. One, when there is risk to the individual worker, your team member, risk to them. Them not doing something or you not intervening puts them at risk. Their career, their standing or relationship with a site manager or leadership at the site or something like that. And you have to step in, right? So that's one. Two, there's risk to the customer. In this case, I would say the internal customer. There's risk to our workers for this individual not doing something, and you have to intervene and manage them. And three, of course, risk to the business. So Jack Welch had these three circumstances that he used to determine whether he should step in and manage the worker. Not like be the administrator, manage the work, but manage the worker, like direct that individual to do specific things and stay on top of it. It was when there was a risk to them, risk to the customer, or risk to the business. I like that approach. I think that makes sense. There are times where you have to step in. Okay. So just consider that when it comes to micromanagers. Make sure that you're asking the right questions. Hey, what is it exactly you expect of me in my role? And for you, if you manage others, avoid becoming the micromanager. If you have a lack of trust in your people, you want to ask yourself, why don't I trust this individual to do these things? If the answer is this individual has no clue what they're doing, they're in the wrong role, I can't trust them to do any of that. If you can validate that, get somebody else's opinion that's not biased, make sure you check yourself first. Well, you still own that issue. That's a leadership issue. If you have somebody who's not in the right role, who's not capable of performing in that role we've placed them in, and there's no hope of them progressing if we provide support and development for them, you have to go through that. Okay, why do you have this trust issue, this mistrust? You need to ask yourself that. Absent that mistrust, because I don't think they're capable, if they are capable and they have good, clear job descriptions, roles and responsibilities, and safety standard work, then you can shift off of the person and onto the work, the quality of the work, and say, hey, what's stopping you from being successful in these areas? What can I do for you? And you become sort of this, you're removing barriers and obstacles for them, and you're enabling them to be successful. And you can quickly shift away from managing the person and even managing the work to qualitatively looking at, hey, how successful are you being really at doing this? That's what you want to get to. All right, so now let's talk about the architect, the strategic leader. So the architect, as I mentioned, optimizes for capacity. We use that word a lot in safety. We want to increase our safety capacity. I'm talking about this from a leadership standpoint, but it has this dual meaning, okay? So let's talk about capacity. This is simply the organization's ability to do the right thing when the safety person, the safety leader, safety manager isn't standing there, okay? Some people say it's culture. Whatever, I'm not going to split hairs. I'm not going to be a word nerd, but I'm going to call it capacity. The architect spends their time on a small number of high leverage things, designing the system so good outcomes are the path of least resistance. Building capability in others, that's capacity, okay? So that the decisions get made correctly 3 levels away from their position, okay? Minimum 3 levels. Earning influence with operations leadership, because you cannot architect anything that you can't fund or schedule. So you need their support. And deciding where resources go, which is the most honest expression of strategy that there is. Now, notice what's not on that list. Doing the inspections yourself, being the smartest person in the room about what, I don't know, record keeping or whatever standard you want to pick, dropping those little 29 CFR 19, whatever. Personally, catching the violation yourself and calling it out, right? The architect's diagnostic is the one I opened with. Do the results hold when you're gone? If the answer is yes, you've built something. You've built capacity. You get it now? If the answer is no, you are the something. And that's not a system. That's a single point of failure with a business card. Wait, I'm showing my age. Actually, come to think of it, I haven't had a business card. It's been a long time. Anyway, real quick, one more thing on the architect, because I don't want to make this sound loftier than it actually is. Strategic does not mean abstract. It does not mean sitting in an office building, slide decks about culture and all that garbage. The architect can still be on the floor, but they're on the floor asking different questions. Not, hey, is this guarded? Why is this here? However, a question might sound like, why was it easier to do it the unsafe way, and who decided that? Is this process always easy to follow? And give me an example of when it isn't. If you followed any of the information that I've shared about the 3P approach to getting into an incident investigation, the paper, people, places, that's the shift in like miniature form. Okay. The administrator checks paper. The controller works on people, but in the wrong direction for the wrong reasons. The architect looks at places and paper to figure out why the people keep ending up in the same spot. That's the difference. All right, so 3 different postures we can take. That's a useful frame for this episode, and it's a good topic, but it's not the full picture. There are more specific patterns out there, and we covered some of them. Let me give you 7 specific ones with the labels, because labels can bring a name to some of these variations, but also gives you an opportunity to discuss them. And these are some of my favorites. I picked some of these names for specific reasons. I call one the firefighter. They live incident to incident. They're excellent in a crisis. We call it this 3-foot world. They're always in their 3-foot world. Calm, fast, knows who to call, gets recognized for it, gets promoted for it sometimes. Oof. We could be creating our own monster there. Here's the trap. The firefighter is rewarded for the existence of fires, how they handle them. Their response to things when they go wrong is laudable. Nobody hands out an award for the incident that didn't happen. So the firefighter is celebrated as a hero when they could be the symptom. A symptom of a system that generates enough emergencies to keep one person fully employed simply by responding to them. So if your calendar is 70% reaction, you don't have a busy job. You have a broken system and a coping mechanism. So the problem with the 3-foot world is that view is supposed to scale. It's pliable. Yes, there are times where you got to go into your 3-foot world. When there's a fire, for example. I was a firefighter, and we used to joke when I went into prevention and education, I kind of saw both sides of this. The firefighter that stands outside on the lawn while the house is on fire with the hose and says, man, they shouldn't have left that pot of grease on the stove unattended. What were they thinking? It's like, that's not the time for that retrospective thinking. Hey, put the fire out. So there is a time for this being in this 3-foot world. But as soon as the fire is out, guess what we did? We started sifting through everything, trying to piece it together. And so how did this happen so that we can make sure it doesn't happen again? So you're going to need both, right? You got to be able to do both. If you're a one-trick pony, if all you can do is put out fires, you're a limiting factor. I think it was Simon Sinek who said that tactical thinkers, they think they're good at strategy, but they're not, right? They're not. Strategic thinkers tend to know they aren't good at some tactics, so they surround themselves with people that can. Just look up Simon Sinek, strategic thinker, search that, and you'll see the video clip where he describes why this is. And it's very interesting. So I had to learn very quickly when I was a firefighter and I wanted to go into prevention and education. I had to learn to think strategically and act tactically. Okay, so we have that. Number 2 is one of our favorites. We love this one. It's the COP. It's the good old COP. And did you know there was an acronym, COP? That's an acronym in safety. Catch only to punish. COP. I thought that was funny. I learned it. It had to have been 15 or so years ago. I learned that one. Compliance by enforcement. They write people up. They believe accountability means consequences that are flowing downhill. The COP buys short-term conformity. I mean, it's real. I won't pretend it isn't, but it's not lasting. Behavior does change when people think they'll get caught or when they're around. But again, it's financed with long-term concealment. Everything goes underground. People learn to hide stuff instead of reported. Think about this. If somebody in your organization were to report a near miss or even a minor issue, hey, I backed into this bollard with my forklift. Oh, well, all right, come with me. Drug test. Like, wait, there's not enough clearance. So we have to turn this corner. It's like probably 3 feet too tight. Like these forklifts aren't making that turn. I'm just trying to tell you. Yeah, I know. But the policy says that if you hit something with the forklift, that you have to drug test. And so we're going to drug test you. You think people are going to report stuff? Am I saying don't drug test people? No, but I'm probably thinking, all right, let's deal with the 3-foot world. Oh my gosh, let's go. Are you okay? Let's go take a look and see what's going on and deal with that. Then expand to strategic and go, you know what? I think this policy of every time somebody bumps into something with a forklift, we drug test them. Maybe we expand that to include a reasonable suspicion assessment and not just the mere fact that they touched something, because there could be some issues with clearance and we're putting them into a situation that we didn't need to put them in. You got to be able to do both of those things. All right, so I'm rambling. The day the cop retires or transfers, the behavior will be back within a month is basically all I'm saying. So there you go. Remember, remove that person and then the behavior goes back to where it was before. That's that first question we opened with, right? 3, the cheerleader. We love the cheerleader. The cheerleader's fun in meetings. Banners, safety barbecues, slogan of the month. Safety is our number 1 priority. That's, hanging on the wall in the building where production scheduling says otherwise. So culture has vibes with no system to support it. Now, I want to be fair. Enthusiasm is not the problem. Enthusiasm attached to a real system is fantastic. That's what we want. We should have an energized safety system and processes in place. Safety is a verb, right? It's something we do that is done. It's the way we work. It's not a noun. So, however, the cheerleader with no engineering controls, no processes, running basically a morale campaign in a hazardous environment, and everyone on the floor knows it. People are going to go, what's this person jumping up and down about, talking about safety this, safety that? Have they seen this? Yeah. That's going to be a problem. And so what you're saying and the reality don't match. That's the risk. Workers have outstanding instincts for detecting the gap between what we say and what's out here in the workplace. Or worse, what we put our money behind, what we fund, what we support. Number 4, the technician. Hey, there's even jobs that are called safety technician or safety tech. The safety technician isn't a role. This is a type of person I'm talking about. They're the encyclopedia of safety standards. They can cite a letter of interpretation. They know the ANSI reference inside the OSHA reg. They technically the most knowledgeable person in the building and routinely ignored because the technician optimizes for being right. And this job pays for being effective. Those overlap way less than we would like to think. I'll give you an example of the difference, being right versus being effective. You have the answer. Instead of blurting it out, why not just sit on the answer and ask? Ask a production manager or supervisor. Do you know the procedure we follow to do X? Let them get there. Let them get, as painful as it might be to let them stumble around and think about it. Like you're trying to gauge, how effective was our safety onboarding, our safety training, our communications? Did it stick? Let them figure it out. Just keep jumping on people with your answers because you're the smartest person in the room, right? What's that phrase? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. But that's kind of weird because then who is the smartest person in the room? And are they in the wrong room? And if they go to another room, all right, enough of that. If you can't translate a technical truth into a business decision that a plant manager will actually support, your expertise is just a hobby. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And they're probably going to get annoyed talking to you. I think it's a much better approach to talk with people to see how much they know, capacity, and then at the appropriate time, backfill some of the gaps. But work with people. Let other people come up with ideas. Maybe you wouldn't have done it that way, but if the end result is the same and them getting there their way doesn't increase risk or put others at risk or cause any otherwise damage to the psyche of the workplace, let them do it. Let them own. That's ownership. And by the way, that is also a distinction worth making. Side note, we often complain about, I need people to take accountability. Accountability is the wrong word. What you want is ownership. How do we get them to own this like it's theirs? It's one way to do it. Just let them shape it, internalize it their own way. Otherwise, just send them all home and you run safety yourself. All right, the politician, number 5. This person manages perception upward. Very good at the quarterly review, knows exactly which numbers get looked at and manages those. The politician's specific sin is that they manage the metric instead of the risk. Recordables get classified creatively. Near miscounts get goosed right before the deadline. And the truly dangerous version isn't the cynical one. It's the sincere one. A sincere politician. The politician who has convinced themselves the numbers are the reality. The person will walk an executive team straight into a serious injury while showing them a green dashboard. They refuse to accept that we might still have some risk yet to manage, but we have a plan and we should be reporting on the work we intend to do, support that we will need, etc. The politician will hide all of that or sugarcoat it as a win. Not good. Heck, I've had people completely leave out details of a safety incident report because it would shed a negative light on some other aspect of our workplace culture that we just don't want to deal with right now. That's not good. 6, the coach builds capability in others, asks more questions than they answer, Let's a supervisor run the investigation badly the first time so they can run it well the third or fourth time. The coach is the honest on-ramp between the technician and the architect. That's how deep knowledge stops being a bottleneck and starts being an asset that multiplies. If you're a strong technician and you want to grow, don't try to leap to strategy. Go straight to coaching next. Remember what I said. You have the answer and you have this urge to just blurt it out and step all over everybody with your answer to your own question. Bite your tongue. Just close your eyes tight. Grit your teeth. I mean, you're going to look ridiculous and they're going to think you're having an episode. But stop yourself. Let them do it. That's the first step in practicing holding back a little bit. Even though you know the answer, hold back. That's what I was referring to. That's getting into this coach mentality. This whole mindset here is incredible. I love it. I still do it to this day. It's great. If you're a strong technician and you want to grow, don't leap straight to strategy. Go through coaching first. Become a coach. Teach what you know until it doesn't need you anymore. I know that sounds crazy. It's liberating. That's how you build capacity. That's how you know it's not going to go off the rails when you leave for 2 weeks. How many of y'all have seen these video clips? Everyone thinks they're cute. And by the way, this is our profession that does this, so I'm going to be very vocally self-critical. And it says the safety manager when they return on Monday or after being gone for a week. And it's the scene from Pirates of the Caribbean, I think, where it's slow motion, the pirate captain walking down the steps, and there's like half the ship's on fire and everybody's sword fighting around them and throwing stuff, and he's just walking through, and it's like that's not cute. I'm not being a Debbie Downer here, but I'm just saying that illustrates what we're talking about. If that's what happens when you leave, you're doing it wrong. Build capacity. Become a coach. Number 7, the rubber stamp. They sign it, file it, and hope. Hope is strong. They're present in title, absent in function. I love that phrase. I had to write it down. Sometimes it's burnout. They're just done. They're like, I give up. Sometimes it's a person who tried for years, got overruled every time, finally stopped spending the energy. Maybe they're in the wrong corporate environment, don't have any support. That's fair. Sometimes it's a role that was created purely to satisfy a customer requirement or an insurance carrier, or I think we need a safety person. It looks good, so we just throw somebody in there. They quickly become the rubber stamp if they don't just leave. Now, I'm not going to be cruel about this one because I've watched good people get ground into this. It's not pretty. But I will be direct. If this is you right now, the answer is not a new tactic. The answer is either a hard conversation with leadership or a different employer. Nothing else is going to fix it. Okay. Now, here's the part that keeps this from being a personality quiz you take on the internet, forget about, or on the YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Spotify. What are the kids listening to anymore? I don't know. These are modes, not identities. These are just different modes we can switch into. Again, don't internalize this as personality. Don't make this you. These are just modes that we're in. Every one of these has a legitimate use. When somebody is bleeding on the floor, you want a firefighter, and you want them to be good at it. When your team just closed out a brutal year, maybe you want to be the cheerleader. When the compliance officer shows up, you better hope you got the technician. Look, reading the situation, choosing the right mode, that's not inconsistency. That's judgment, and it's an actual skill. The pathology isn't having a mode. The pathology is getting stuck in one, regardless of what the moment calls for. One trick pony, one gear, one speed. You've heard these expressions. And I'll tell you exactly why most of us get stuck. We get stuck in the mode that got us promoted. You can probably replace the word promoted with validation, whatever we get applauded for, will go, oh, I'll do that again. I'll do more of that. I'll do so much of that, they won't know what hit them. Until it just becomes boring and doesn't apply across the rest of the business. It just doesn't scale. You need to understand these different modes so you know which one to switch into. Remember that the technician who got hired for their regulatory depth keeps proving regulatory depth long after the job stopped needing it. The firefighter who got noticed for handling a bad amputation keeps looking for fires. The controller got burned once by delegating and never delegated again. That's not a character flaw. That's a perfectly rational response to a reward signal. It's just one that expires and nobody sends you the notice. All right, so let's get practical. That's what we do here. 4 things. Do them this month. 1, audit your calendar, not your intentions. Pull the last 4 weeks. Put every hour into a bucket. Reactive, administrative, control, or capacity building. Don't guess. Actually look. The last 4 weeks, every hour you spent working on something, was it reactive, administrative? Was it controlling? Was it capacity building? Your calendar is the only honest statement of your strategy. Everything else is an aspiration. If less than 20% of your time is capacity building, you're not strategic. Not yet anyway, no matter what your title might say. And that's okay, that's fine. Now you know the number. And the number is something you can move, you can work on. Number 2, run the vacation test on purpose. Pick one process you own. Step out of it for 2 weeks. Tell your team you're not available on that thing for this period of time and mean it and watch what happens. Whatever breaks is a system you never actually built anyway. You were personally holding it together with attention. Now you have a real project instead of a vague feeling about what needs to be done. That's something you can work on. You haven't built capacity. Number 3, change one question. The single fastest mode shift available to you. Next time you find a hazard, don't ask who did this, or is this compliant, or why is this here? Ask, what made this the easy choice? What made this easy to do? That one question moves you off of the person and onto the process, the motivation behind what people will choose to do. And you could start that right away. It costs nothing. You could do it now. That's one single switch you can make. Number 4, name your default out loud. Tell your team which mode you default to consistently after you've gone through the first 3 things here. Say it plainly. Hey, I know I default to controller. If you feel me stepping on you, something that you own, or, call it out. I'd rather hear it from you than make a mistake and have you just suffer in silence and work around me. Okay. I know I can be like that sometimes. I'm working on it. You're going to help me. All right. This is scarier than it sounds, and it works better than it should. Trust me. I've had to do this. It converts a private flaw into a shared discussable thing. Discussable? Talkable. I think that might be worse. It gives people explicit permission to call you out in a safe way. That permission is worth more than most of the safety programs I've seen. Now, let me leave you with this. Nobody starts out as an architect. Everybody starts as a technician or a firefighter, something like that, because that's what the early job actually is. And the organization rewards it. And that's not a bad thing. The question isn't whether you've been in one of these modes. You have. So have I. And I've been in more than one of the uncomfortable ones as well. Maybe. My fingers were crossed. The question is whether you're still choosing your mode or whether it's been choosing you. If any of this hit a little too close to home, good. It did for me as well. That's the useful kind of uncomfortable that we want to get comfortable with. It means there's room. There's a version of this job that's more effective and honestly a lot less exhausting than the one you might be doing right now. Now go check your calendar. Start there. And I'll see you on the next episode.